I buried my wife 4 years ago. Then she looked me straight in the eyes, aboard a luxury cruise. If what I was seeing was real, then someone had lied to me. And if someone had lied about her death, whose body had I buried 4 years ago? Before anyone could move, her phone screen lit up on the deck. A message appeared. Neither of them noticed. I bent down and picked it up. One sentence filled the screen. He recognizes you. Leave the ship before midnight. The sender's name froze the blood in my veins. Dr. Samuel Eckenem. The same doctor who had signed my wife's death certificate. My name is Malika Adebayo. 4 years earlier, life had been beautifully ordinary. Nadia and I had been married for 11 years. We had no children, not because we didn't want them, but because life kept asking us to wait. We promised each other that once my business became stable, we would finally start a family. That dream kept us going. We weren't wealthy. Not yet. I owned a small freight brokerage connecting suppliers between the United States and West Africa. Some months we celebrated. Other months we barely covered payroll. But every evening we still ate dinner together. Every Sunday we called our families in Nigeria. Every birthday we danced in the living room. Those simple moments made me believe I already had everything. Nadia often told me money could wait. Love couldn't. Back then, I believed every word. She had a gift for making strangers feel like old friends. Wherever we went, people remembered her. Restaurant owners greeted her by name. Neighbors trusted her with spare keys. Even my employees adored her. Sometimes I joked that if she ever ran for mayor, she would win without printing a single campaign poster. She would laugh and kiss my forehead. Looking back now, I wonder how much of that smile was real. About 2 years before her supposed death, our lives began to change. My company landed its first international shipping contract. It wasn't huge, but it attracted investors. Banks suddenly returned my calls. Business conferences became part of my calendar. We moved into a larger house outside Atlanta. For the first time, success felt possible. That was also when new people entered our lives. Successful people, powerful people, people who owned private clinics, investment firms, and luxury hotels. Among them was a respected physician named Dr. Samuel Eckenem. Everyone admired him. He funded scholarships. He appeared on television. He donated millions to hospitals across Africa. He carried himself like a man devoted to saving lives. Nadia admired him immediately. "He does so much good," she often said. I agreed. I had no reason not to. The doctor and his wife began inviting us to private dinners. Most guests were wealthy entrepreneurs, government officials, investors, people discussing opportunities I had only dreamed about. At first, I felt out of place. Nadia didn't. She belonged in every room she entered. She adapted effortlessly. She became close to Dr. Eckenem's foundation. Sometimes she volunteered at fundraising events. Sometimes she stayed after meetings to help organize charity projects. I was proud of her. Or at least, I thought I was. Then, small things started changing. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that screamed betrayal. Just tiny cracks. She became strangely protective of her phone. She occasionally canceled dinner because foundation meetings ran late. She traveled twice with the charity without asking whether I wanted to come. Whenever I asked questions, she smiled. "Malik, you're working too hard. You worry too much. Trust me." And I did. Because trust is easy when you've never been given a reason to doubt. One evening, we sat on our back patio, watching the sunset. The air smelled like rain. Nadia rested her head on my shoulder. She asked quietly, "If something happened to me someday, would you move on?" I laughed. "I don't even want to imagine that." She didn't laugh. Instead, she stared toward the trees, almost as if she already knew something I didn't. That memory haunted me for years. A few months later, everything collapsed. Nadia complained about dizziness, then headaches, then unbearable chest pain. Dr. Eckenem personally insisted she come to his private medical center. He assured us she would receive the best treatment available. I trusted him completely. After all, he was one of the most respected doctors in the country. If only I had questioned him then, If only I had asked one more question, because the next phone call would destroy everything I believed about my life. She wasn't dying. She was disappearing. The phone call came just before sunrise. I still remember the sound of it. Not because it was loud, because it divided my life into two parts. The man before that call, and the man I became afterward. Dr. Samuel Ekanam spoke calmly, almost too calmly. Malik, I'm very sorry. Your wife suffered a sudden cardiac collapse during the night. We did everything we could. For several seconds, I couldn't answer. The words refused to enter my mind. They floated somewhere above me, meaningless and unreal. Finally, I whispered one question. Can I see her? There was a long silence. Then he sighed. The damage was extensive. I don't think that's how she'd want you to remember her. I didn't argue. Grief steals more than happiness. It steals judgment. When I arrived at the hospital, everything had already been arranged. The paperwork, the death certificate, the funeral home, the transportation. Every answer came before I even asked a question. At the time, I thought they were helping me. Today, I know they were controlling the story. Dr. Ekanam met me in a quiet office. He placed one hand on my shoulder. I'm deeply sorry, Malik. Nadia spoke about you often. You were the love of her life. I believed him. Looking back now, that was the biggest mistake I ever made. The funeral happened 3 days later. The coffin remained closed. Everyone said it was for my own good. Family members cried. Friends embraced me. Pastors spoke about heaven. I barely heard any of it. My entire world rested inside that wooden coffin. At least, that was what I believed. My mother stood beside me throughout the ceremony. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "My son, when pain blinds your eyes, let patience become your sight." I nodded through tears. I didn't understand her words then. Years later, they became the reason I survived. After the funeral, silence moved into my house. Every room reminded me of Nadia, her favorite coffee mug, her reading chair, the scarf hanging beside the front door. Even the perfume lingering in our bedroom felt like another goodbye. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't work. Some mornings I forgot what day it was. Other mornings I wished I wouldn't wake up. The business began collapsing beside me. Clients left. Contracts expired. Employees searched for more stable jobs. Within 8 months, everything I had spent 15 years building was almost gone. One afternoon, I sat alone inside my nearly empty warehouse. The echo of my footsteps sounded louder than my own thoughts. I stared at the last delivery truck I still owned. I considered selling it, giving up, starting over somewhere nobody knew my name. Then my mother called. She didn't ask about the business. She didn't ask about money. She asked one simple question. Malik, have you stopped believing in yourself? I couldn't answer, because the truth was, I had. A week later, I flew back to Lagos. Not because I had a plan, because I had nowhere else to go. My mother welcomed me without asking questions. She cooked my favorite meal. She prayed over me. Then the next morning, she woke me before sunrise. We're going to work. She took me to the family warehouse, where my late father had built a modest transport business decades earlier. Old delivery vans, weathered loading docks, hard-working people who had known me since childhood. Nobody treated me like a broken man. They simply handed me work, boxes, invoices, schedules. For the first time in months, my hands became busy enough for my heart to breathe again. While reorganizing one of my father's old filing cabinets, I discovered notebooks filled with logistics strategies, shipping routes, supplier relationships, cost-saving methods. Every page carried his handwriting. Every note felt like advice from beyond the grave. Night after night, I studied those notebooks. I began modernizing his ideas: digital tracking, cross-border partnerships, cold chain transportation. Small improvements became larger opportunities. One client became 5. 5 became 20. 20 became contracts stretching across West Africa. 3 years passed. Quietly. Patiently. Without shortcuts. Without headlines. I rebuilt everything. Not to become rich. To become worthy of the second chance life had unknowingly given me. My mother's words guided every decision. Character builds what tragedy cannot destroy. Then one afternoon, my executive assistant walked into my office carrying a gold envelope. "It's an invitation," she said. "An exclusive investment summit aboard the Ocean Crown luxury cruise." I smiled politely. Until I read the sponsor's name. The Econem Global Medical Foundation. The same foundation founded by Dr. Samuel Econem. The doctor who had declared my wife dead. A cold feeling spread through my body. For 4 years, I had buried my questions beside Nadia. Now, those questions were sailing toward me across the Atlantic. And without realizing it, I had just accepted the invitation that would uncover the greatest lie of my life. The Ocean Crown cut through the Atlantic like a floating city. From the outside, it looked like paradise. Crystal chandeliers, private suites, infinity pools stretching toward the horizon. Inside, it was carrying the darkest secret of my life. I didn't board that ship looking for revenge. I boarded it looking for answers. My mother had hugged me before I left Nigeria. She looked into my eyes and said, "My son, anger may win an argument, but truth wins a lifetime." I carried those words with me. Because I knew that if Nadia was truly alive, someone had spent years protecting that secret. After reading the message on her phone, I returned it exactly where I had found it. I couldn't let her know I had seen it. Not yet. The message had confirmed 2 things. First, she knew who I was the moment she saw me. Second, someone else was giving her orders. That meant she wasn't completely free. I needed to know who was controlling the game, not just who was playing it. I spent the next several hours pretending nothing had happened. I attended investment panels, shook hands with executives, listened to presentations about global shipping and healthcare partnerships. But my eyes never stopped searching. Eventually, I saw Nadia again. She wasn't laughing anymore. She stayed close to the man in the white suit. His name badge identified him as Adrian Cole, chairman of Cole International Holdings, one of the ship's principal investors. He looked confident, protective, but every few minutes, Nadia glanced over her shoulder. Not toward me, toward Dr. Samuel Econem. That told me everything. She wasn't afraid of Adrian. She was afraid of the doctor. Late that evening, I quietly followed them through one of the ship's private corridors. Luxury guests rarely entered that section. Security guards stood near every entrance. Only VIP guests had access. Nadia and Adrian disappeared inside a conference lounge. Moments later, Dr. Econem joined them. The door closed. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I noticed something unusual. A young steward pushed a catering cart toward the room. As he reached the door, one folder slid from the cart onto the floor. No one noticed, except me. When the steward disappeared inside, I picked it up. The cover carried one sentence: Confidential Identity Transition Program. My pulse quickened. Inside were financial reports, private medical records, passport applications, new identities, photographs. Then I saw her picture, Nadia, except the name beneath it wasn't Nadia. It read, Mara Cole, nationality, South African, marital status, married. Everything had been rewritten. Her entire life had been erased. Before I could read another page, someone grabbed the folder from my hands. I turned around. It was an elderly woman, wearing a cruise staff uniform. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her. If you value your life, don't let them know you've seen those documents. Then she slipped a folded note into my jacket pocket. Without another word, she walked away. I waited until I reached my cabin before opening it. Inside was only one sentence. Your wife never wanted you to believe she was dead. I read it 3 times. My hands began shaking. If Nadia hadn't planned her own disappearance, then someone else had. But why? Money? Power? Blackmail? None of it made sense. Not yet. Unable to sleep, I searched every public record available through my company's secure database. Coal International, the Econom Foundation, medical charities, corporate mergers, everything connected somehow. Then I found the missing piece. 4 years earlier, just 2 weeks after Nadia's reported death, a trust worth nearly $300 million had quietly transferred ownership. One signature approved the transaction. Dr. Samuel Econom. The beneficiary? Adrian Cole. I leaned back in my chair. This had never been about love. It had never been about grief. It had been about money, hidden behind a fake death. And somehow, Nadia had become part of the scheme. Whether willingly or by force, I still didn't know. The next morning, I received an anonymous message under my cabin door. No name, no envelope. Just a single handwritten sentence. Meet me in the engine room at midnight if you want to know whose body was buried in your wife's coffin. I stared at the note. The engine room was the one place passengers never entered. If this was a trap, I might never leave that ship alive. But if it wasn't, the answer I had searched for during 4 painful years was finally within reach. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my pocket. For the first time since seeing Nadia alive, I realized the greatest danger on this cruise wasn't discovering the truth. It was surviving long enough to tell it. I spent the entire day pretending nothing had changed. I attended meetings, smiled for photographs, shook hands with investors. Inside, every heartbeat counted down to midnight. The anonymous note stayed folded inside my jacket. Every time I touched it, I remembered the same sentence. Meet me in the engine room if you want to know whose body was buried in your wife's coffin. At exactly 5 minutes before midnight, I left my suite. The luxurious hallways were almost empty. The music from the ballroom echoed faintly through the ship. Most guests were celebrating another successful evening. They had no idea that beneath their feet, a secret had survived for 4 years. I followed the emergency signs leading toward the lower decks. The air became warmer. The elegant carpets disappeared. Steel walls replaced polished wood. The sound of the engines grew louder with every step. Then I saw her, the elderly steward who had taken the confidential folder from my hands. She looked around carefully before speaking. You came alone. I nodded. You know my wife. The woman closed her eyes for a moment. I knew Nadia before she became Mara. My heart pounded. She continued. My name is Grace. I worked as a senior nurse in Dr. Econom's private medical center. Everything inside me froze. Grace led me into a small maintenance room. She locked the door behind us. Then she reached into an old canvas bag and removed a thick envelope. The documents inside were worn with age. Hospital records, identity files, private photographs. One picture immediately caught my attention. It showed Nadia lying in a hospital bed. She wasn't dead. She wasn't even unconscious. She looked terrified. Standing beside her was Dr. Econom. Another photograph showed Adrian Cole signing several legal documents. Grace looked directly into my eyes. Your wife never died. I struggled to breathe. Then why? She interrupted gently. Because someone else needed the world to believe she had. Grace explained everything. 4 years earlier, Adrian Cole had been under investigation for laundering hundreds of millions of dollars through shell charities and medical foundations. Several witnesses had agreed to testify. One of those witnesses was Nadia. She had accidentally discovered confidential financial records while volunteering for Dr. Econom's foundation. She wanted to expose everything, but she underestimated how dangerous powerful people could become. Instead of allowing her to testify, they created another plan, a fake death, a new identity, permanent silence. They threatened to kill you, Grace whispered. They told Nadia she had only 2 choices, disappear forever, or watch her husband die. My knees nearly gave way. Every lonely birthday, every anniversary spent beside her grave, every tear, every prayer, she had carried the same pain, alone, to keep me alive, for 4 years. I finally understood why she looked terrified when she saw me. She hadn't been afraid of me. She had been afraid for me. Grace handed me a small flash drive. I've protected this for years. It contains everything. Bank transfers, recorded conversations, false medical reports, passport applications, video footage from the hospital. Enough evidence to destroy every lie. But there's one problem. I looked at her. Dr. Ekanem knows these files still exist. He has been searching for them since the day Nadia disappeared. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed outside the room. Several voices. One belonged to Adrian. The other, Dr. Ekanem. Grace's face lost its color. They found us. The doorknob slowly turned. Locked. Someone struck the metal door from the outside. Once. Then again. Dr. Ekanem's calm voice echoed through the corridor. Grace, you've hidden long enough. I know he's in there. Adrian spoke next. Open the door, Malik. We can still solve this peacefully. I looked at Grace. She quietly placed the flash drive into my hand. Whatever happens, don't let them take this. Then she pointed toward a narrow maintenance hatch hidden behind stacked equipment. It leads to another corridor. You must leave. What about you? I whispered. She smiled sadly. I've been waiting 4 years to tell the truth. My part is finished. The pounding on the door became violent. Metal hinges groaned. The lock began breaking apart. Grace stepped toward the entrance, buying me time. I crawled through the narrow hatch just as the maintenance room door exploded open behind us. The last thing I heard before disappearing into the darkness was Grace's voice. You can silence people, but you'll never silence the truth. Then came a loud scream, followed by complete silence. I gripped the flash drive so tightly my hand began bleeding. Everything had changed. This was no longer about finding Nadia. It was about exposing an empire built on lies. And before sunrise, the entire world was going to know the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Grace's scream echoed through my mind long after I escaped the maintenance corridor. The flash drive felt heavier than gold inside my pocket. It carried the truth, and people had already died trying to protect it. My mother used to tell me, "My son, truth is expensive, but living without it costs even more." I finally understood what she meant. I locked myself inside my cabin. Hands shaking, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Hundreds of files appeared. Video recordings, hospital surveillance footage, audio conversations, bank statements, passport applications. Everything had been carefully organized. Grace hadn't simply collected evidence. She had prepared a case. One video caught my attention. Its timestamp was dated 4 years earlier, the night Nadia was declared dead. I pressed play. The security footage showed Nadia sitting inside a hospital room. She looked frightened but healthy. Minutes later, Dr. Samuel Ekanem entered. Adrian Cole followed behind him. Their conversation was crystal clear. Nadia, Adrian said calmly, this is your final opportunity. You testify, and Malik dies. Nadia immediately burst into tears. Dr. Ekanem placed several documents on the table. A new passport. A new identity. A new life. You disappear tonight, and your husband lives. The room fell silent. Then Nadia whispered the words that shattered my heart. I'll disappear. But promise me, you'll never touch my husband. Adrian smiled. You have my word. I couldn't stop crying. For 4 years, I had believed she abandoned me. The truth was far more painful. She had sacrificed everything to keep me alive. Another video began playing automatically. This one came from the hospital morgue. I watched staff members wheel in the body of an unidentified woman. No family, no visitors, no identification. Dr. Ekanem quietly signed several forms. That unknown woman became the body placed inside Nadia's coffin. The woman I buried had never been my wife. She had been another victim, someone whose family would probably never know where she had gone. I closed my laptop. My hands were trembling uncontrollably. That wasn't fraud. It wasn't corruption. It was pure evil. At sunrise, I contacted the FBI agents attending the investment summit. Several international investigators had quietly boarded the cruise because of ongoing financial crimes involving offshore foundations. Until that morning, they lacked one thing: evidence. I handed them the flash drive. Every file, every recording, every document. The lead investigator looked at me in complete disbelief. This changes everything. Within minutes, the ship quietly entered lockdown. No announcements were made. Passengers continued eating breakfast, unaware of what was unfolding behind closed doors. Dr. Ekanem was arrested first. He never resisted. He simply lowered his head as federal agents placed him in handcuffs. Adrian Cole tried to flee, using the ship's private helicopter deck. He didn't make it far. Security officers intercepted him before takeoff. His empire collapsed before lunchtime. Bank accounts were frozen. Corporate records were seized. Luxury foundations were shut down. Years of carefully constructed lies disappeared in a single morning. There was only one person left to face: Nadia. Agents escorted her into a private interview room. When the door opened, we stared at one another for several seconds. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. 4 years of silence stood between us. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I slowly shook my head. "No. You have nothing to apologize for." She covered her face and broke into tears. "I wanted to come back. Every day. I wrote letters. I celebrated your birthdays alone. I watched your company grow from newspaper articles. I prayed that someday you'd understand." I walked closer. For the first time in 4 years, I took her hands. They were trembling, just like mine. "I hated you," I admitted quietly. "I blamed you. I buried you 1,000 times inside my heart." Tears streamed down her face. "I know, and I accepted that price the day I chose your life over mine." I looked at the woman I had loved for more than a decade. The woman who had lost her identity to protect me. My mother had been right all along. Character reveals itself most clearly when sacrifice has no audience. Nadia hadn't disappeared because she stopped loving me. She disappeared because she loved me enough to lose everything. I couldn't change the past. Neither could she. But I refused to let hatred become the final chapter of our story. So instead of asking why she left, I thanked her for surviving. And in that moment, the weight I had carried for 4 long years finally lifted. 6 months passed after the arrests. The headlines disappeared. The television interviews ended. The courtrooms grew quiet. For the first time in years, my life no longer belonged to strangers. It belonged to me. The criminal network behind Dr. Samuel Ekanem and Adrian Cole collapsed completely. Governments from several countries reopened missing person investigations. Dozens of families finally learned what had happened to relatives they had searched for over many years. Justice arrived slowly, but it arrived. My mother used to say, "The sun never asks permission to rise. Truth doesn't ask permission either." She was right. Truth had finally found its morning. Nadia entered a witness protection rehabilitation program. Legally, she had lived under a false identity. Emotionally, she had lived inside a prison. She needed time. So did I. People often asked if we immediately became husband and wife again. Life isn't written that way. Trust is not rebuilt in a single conversation. It grows the same way it was first created, one honest day at a time. We began meeting every Sunday. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we sat quietly beside a lake without saying a single word. Silence no longer frightened us. It healed us. My business continued to grow, not because I chased wealth, because I remembered what it felt like to lose everything. I opened logistics training centers in Nigeria and Ghana. Young people who couldn't afford university learned transportation management, warehouse operations, and international trade. Hundreds found stable careers. Several eventually started companies of their own. Watching them succeed brought me more happiness than signing any contract. I also created a foundation in my father's name. It provided legal support for families searching for missing relatives. No husband, no wife, no child should spend years wondering whether the people they love are truly gone. Pain should never become a business. One afternoon, My mother visited our training center in Lagos. She watched dozens of young apprentices loading trucks and studying shipping software. She smiled quietly. "You finally understand." I laughed. Understand what? She looked at me the same way she had when I was a little boy. Success isn't measured by what you keep. It's measured by what continues growing after you're gone. Those words became the guiding principle of my life. Nearly a year after the cruise, Nadia asked if I would visit one place with her. We flew back to Atlanta. Neither of us spoke much during the drive. Eventually, we stopped at a quiet cemetery. The same cemetery I had visited every month for 4 years. Together, we walked toward the grave bearing Nadia's name. Fresh flowers rested against the headstone. For years, I had stood there asking questions that nobody could answer. This time was different. Nadia gently placed white roses beside the stone. Tears filled her eyes. She whispered a prayer. Not for herself, for the unknown woman whose body had been buried there. A woman whose family had never received the chance to say goodbye. We later worked with investigators to identify her remains and return them to her loved ones. Only then did that chapter finally come to rest. As we walked away, I reached into my pocket. For 4 years, I had carried our wedding photograph inside my wallet, the same picture I had shown Adrian Cole on the cruise. Its edges were worn, its colors had faded, but its meaning had changed. It no longer reminded me of what I had lost. It reminded me of what truth had restored, not the past. The future. Nadia looked at me. "Do you think we'll ever be the people we were before?" I smiled gently. "No. And that's okay. We survived becoming different." She slipped her hand into mine. This time, neither of us was trying to escape the past. We were simply walking toward tomorrow. The opening of my story began on the deck of a luxury cruise where I saw the woman I believed had died. Its ending happened with the same 2 people, standing together, no longer separated by lies, no longer imprisoned by fear, only guided by truth. Because I finally learned that love alone cannot protect a family. But love, courage, and truth together can rebuild one.